When we think of ancient Rome, what comes to mind? Grandeur, power, the Colosseum legions marching in perfect formation. Rome was a civilization built on law and order, a legacy that still echoes in our legal systems today. But if you were to peel back that shiny veneer of civic pride, you'd find something much darker, much more brutal. Beneath the marble temples and the bustling forums, there was a system of justice built not on rehabilitation, not on mercy, but on one single powerful emotion: fear. Let's get one thing straight. In ancient Rome, punishment was almost never about reforming the individual. No one was sent to a Roman prison hoping they'd come out a better person. The entire concept was alien to them. Roman justice was a spectacle. It was public, it was brutal, and it was designed to be unforgettable. The goal wasn't to correct a person's behavior, it was to make a terrifying example out of them. Every whip, every shackle, every execution was a carefully choreographed performance, and the entire city was the audience. The message was simple and brutally effective. This is the price of disobeying Rome. This is what happens when you step out of line. The fear of that fate was meant to be the invisible chain that held the massive, sprawling empire together. It was a tool of social control far more powerful than any legion. Now, you might think, okay, tough justice. I get it, but it wasn't that simple. Roman justice was anything but equal. Your experience with the law depended almost entirely on one thing: your social status. Were you a patrician, a wealthy senator with land and influence? You might get a fine or perhaps exile to a comfortable villa. But if you were a plebeian, a foreigner, or worst of all, a slave, the system had a completely different set of rules for you. For the lower classes and non-citizens, the law was a weapon pointed directly at them. The protections afforded to a Roman citizen simply vanished. While a citizen might be spared the worst indignities, a slave could be tortured for testimony, even if they were just a witness. The disparity was staggering. The same crime committed by two different people could lead to a slap on the wrist for one and a horrific public execution for the other. This wasn't a flaw in the system. It was the system working exactly as intended. It reinforced the social hierarchy, reminding everyone of their place. It told the poor and the enslaved that their lives were cheap, and their suffering was just part of the natural order of things. The Romans were masters of psychological warfare, and they turned their cities into theaters of terror. Public squares, the very heart of civic life, were transformed into stages for punishment. Imagine walking to the market and seeing a man being flogged until the flesh was stripped from his back. Imagine seeing crucifixions lined up along the Appian Way, a grim welcome to anyone entering the city. These weren't hidden away. They were front and center. Crowds would gather, not just out of morbid curiosity, but because it was part of their civic education. Children watched. Soldiers watched. The rich and the poor watched together. The collective experience of witnessing such raw, visceral suffering was meant to sear a lesson into the public consciousness. The pain of one individual became a tool to control thousands. By making punishment a public festival, the state ensured that the threat of its power was never an abstract concept. It was real, it was bloody, and it could happen to you. This is where the Romans showed their true genius for control. They understood that a law written on a scroll is just words, but the sight of a man being thrown to wild beasts in the arena, that's a lesson you never forget. They knew that visible, tangible pain created obedience far more effectively than any moral or legal argument. The screams of the condemned were the empire's most effective propaganda. Think about the sheer variety and creativity of their punishments. Crucifixion was reserved for the lowest of the low slaves and rebels designed for maximum pain and public humiliation over days. Burning alive was a common fate for arsonists. For parricide, the murder of a parent. The Romans devised the punishment of the sack. The condemned was sewn into a leather sack with a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey, and then thrown into the Tiber River. Each punishment was symbolic, a poetic and gruesome reflection of the crime itself. It was a narrative of terror told through broken bodies. To live under Roman rule was to exist in a state of constant low-level anxiety. The law wasn't just in the courts, it was in the air you breathed. Fear was the true foundation of the Pax Romana, the so-called Roman peace. It was a peace kept not by goodwill, but by the ever-present threat of unimaginable violence. So, when we look back at the glory of Rome, it's crucial to remember the cost of that glory. The order they cherished was paid for with the suffering of millions, whose punishment served not to create justice, but to enforce obedience. The Roman Empire wasn't just built on stone and mortar. It was cemented together with terror. Thanks for watching. If you found this dive into the dark side of history interesting, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. See you in the next video. Have you ever wondered how the Romans managed to control such a vast and often rebellious empire? Let us dive into how the Roman state used punishment to maintain its authority and keep society in line. Think about crucifixions, which were deliberately carried out along busy roads. The goal wasn't just to punish the individual, but to terrorize anyone who witnessed it. Every traveler, merchant and soldier passing by would see the grim reality of what happened to those who challenged Roman authority. This wasn't just about the pain inflicted. It was about creating a lasting psychological impact on the entire community. The spectacle served as a constant, brutal reminder of the state's power. This brings us to another crucial point. Inequality was baked into the system. Your social status determined everything. If you were a wealthy Roman citizen, you might face a fine house arrest, or at worst, a relatively dignified exile. You had rights, you could hire lawyers, and you had a network to support you. But if you were poor, a foreigner, or enslaved, the story was completely different. The law offered you little to no protection. You were far more likely to face the harshest and most brutal forms of punishment, like being thrown to wild beasts in the arena, sentenced to hard labor in the mines, or, of course, crucifixion. The law wasn't a shield for everyone. For many, it was a weapon used against them. This disparity reinforced the existing social order, reminding the lower classes of their place and discouraging any thoughts of rebellion. One of the most effective methods of control was removing individuals from society. This wasn't just about locking someone up in a cell. Romans used a punishment called damnatio ad metalla, which condemned a person to a life of hard labor in the mines. This was often a death sentence, but a slow and agonizing one. Sent to remote, harsh locations, prisoners were worked to exhaustion in brutal conditions. They were stripped of their names, their families, and their entire identity. They ceased to be people and became mere tools of the state. Survival depended on total obedience. This punishment didn't just remove a person from society, it erased them from it. Another powerful tool was public humiliation. Shame was a potent weapon in Roman culture, where reputation or dignitas was everything. Being publicly accused, paraded through the streets, or subjected to ritual shaming could destroy a person's life as effectively as any physical punishment. The loss of social standing, the stares of your neighbors, the whispers behind your back, these were long-lasting consequences. Even if you were eventually cleared of a crime, the stain of public accusation could follow you and your family for generations. The fear of this social death was a powerful deterrent, forcing people to conform to societal norms and avoid any behavior that might attract negative attention. Then there were the punishments reserved for those who posed a direct threat to the state's authority, such as rebels, traitors, or leaders of uprisings. These were designed to be the most terrifying of all. The message had to be crystal clear: do not challenge Rome. The punishments were intentionally cruel and theatrical to maximize their deterrent effect. The goal was to instill fear so deep that it would quell any potential resistance before it even began. It was about securing loyalty through intimidation, not through trust or consensus. Exile was another common and devastating punishment, often reserved for the political elite who fell out of favor. On the surface, it might seem less brutal than the mines or the arena. But for a Roman, being exiled was a living death. You were cut off from your home, your family, your social network, and your source of wealth. More importantly, you were stripped of your legal protections as a Roman citizen. Once outside the borders of Roman influence, you were vulnerable. A non-person, many who were exiled simply disappeared from the historical record, their stories ending abruptly. It was a way of making inconvenient people vanish without the menaces of a public execution. So, when we look back at ancient Rome, we see an empire held together not just by its military might, but by a carefully calibrated system of fear. The Roman punishment system was a public performance, a daily drama reminding everyone of the state's power. By making the consequences of disobedience visible, public, and unequal, Rome ensured that most people would choose compliance. It's a stark reminder that throughout history, legal systems have often served the powerful, using the threat of punishment not just to stop crime, but to control society itself. Thanks for watching. If you found this glimpse into the darker side of Roman life interesting, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what other aspects of the ancient world you'd like to explore. See you next time. How did an ancient empire manage to control a vast territory stretching from Britain to the Middle East long before the age of instant communication? The answer wasn't just brute force or military might. The true genius of ancient Rome lay in its incredible system of authority, structure, and long-term order. This wasn't a system that just reacted to problems. It was a system designed to prevent them. Let us explore how Rome built an empire that lasted for centuries by making order not just a rule, but a way of life. Imagine living in a world where everyone, from the senator in his villa to the merchant in the bustling forum, understood the rules. In Rome, authority wasn't abstract. It was visible, predictable, and woven into the very fabric of daily existence. Power wasn't just held by the emperor. It was distributed through a clear hierarchy of officials, laws, and public procedures. This structure was designed to be understood by everyone. People knew where power was, how it worked, and what was expected of them. This wasn't about constant surveillance. It was about creating a shared understanding that guided behavior long before a soldier or a guard ever had to step in. The Roman legal system was the backbone of this order. Law wasn't just a dusty scroll locked away in a temple. It was a constant, living presence. It shaped how people spoke, where they could go, and how they interacted with one another. Think of it like the rules of a massive citywide game that everyone knew how to play. Public legal proceedings were a key part of this. When a dispute was settled in the forum, it wasn't just about two individuals. It was a public demonstration of how the rules were applied, reinforcing the authority of the state for all to see. Through this constant repetition and visibility, order became familiar. a part of the daily routine rather than something imposed from above. It was less about forcing people to comply and more about creating an environment where compliance was the most natural choice. Over generations, this system became deeply ingrained. Communities adapted. The rules of the state became the habits of the people. Structure became routine. This is how Rome managed to govern millions of people across diverse cultures and vast distances. They didn't need an official in every village or a guard on every street corner. Governance relied on consistency and a shared framework. People followed the rules not just because they feared punishment, but because it was simply the way things were done. This acceptance, built over time, was a far more powerful tool for control than any army. It was a system that governed minds as much as it governed lands. The administrative machinery behind this was truly remarkable for its time. A network of officials, a meticulous system for keeping records, and standardized procedures ensured that the empire could function smoothly. This administrative continuity meant that authority remained stable even when emperors were assassinated or civil wars erupted. The system was designed to be bigger than any single individual, ensuring the long-term survival of the Roman state. This emphasis on organization and procedure is one of Rome's most enduring legacies. It was this machine of governance that kept the empire running day in and day out, collecting taxes, building roads, and administering justice from Scotland to Syria. Roman legal traditions, with their focus on clarity, order, and written codes, were revolutionary. They laid the groundwork for many of the legal systems we have today across Europe and the world. Concepts like innocent until proven guilty and the importance of evidence can trace their roots back to Roman legal thought. When you look at modern legal principles, you're often seeing the ghost of Roman administration. They were pioneers in creating a systematic approach to law that aimed for consistency and fairness, at least according to their own standards. This intellectual framework for order was just as important as the physical infrastructure of roads and aqueducts they built. However, there's a flip side to this story of incredible organization. While the Roman system was a marvel of efficiency, it often prioritized the collective over the individual. Historical accounts are filled with the deeds of emperors, generals, and senators. But the personal experiences of ordinary people are largely silent. The structure was what mattered, not the individual memories of those living within it. For the Roman state, a person was often just a numberer, taxpayer, a soldier, a citizen. The grand goals of expansion and stability often overshadowed personal outcomes. As a result, countless lives passed through this immense system without leaving a trace. Their stories lost to time because the system itself was not designed to preserve them. The legacy of Roman governance is therefore complex and double-edged. On one hand, it shows us how long-lasting societies are built through incredible organization, shared rules, and institutional strength. It's a powerful lesson in how structure can create stability on a scale that is hard to comprehend. On the other hand, it serves as a reminder that systems can become so powerful that they outlive and overshadow the very people they are meant to govern. The individual can get lost in the machinery of the state. So, why does this ancient system still matter to us today? Studying Roman authority helps us understand the fundamental principles of how governance shapes civilization. It reveals the trade-offs between order and freedom, between the collective good and individual experience. The systems of order that a society creates leave lasting impressions, influencing culture, behavior, and institutions for centuries, long after the empire itself has disappeared. Ancient Rome may no longer exist as a political power, but the structures it pioneered and the questions it raises about power and society continue to influence and challenge our modern world. Its approach to authority remains a vital subject of study, reflection, and debate. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to ancient Rome. If you found this exploration of power and order fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what other aspects of the Roman world you'd like to explore next. See you in the next video.